Gentlemen, we have called you together to inform you that we are going to overthrow the United States government.
I think really the big takeaway is this. There are forces on this planet that have been very mysterious. And we know those forces are malevolent. And those forces have been working to poison and disease and dumb down humanity. And now mainline globalist publications and mainline universities on a planetary scale are all heralding the end of humanity, a post-human world nightmare scenario. Now, the only question is, who's running this? The Bible would tell you it's interdimensional creatures that we can't see. And now science shows that those dimensions do exist. And mainline mathematical equations from the biggest supercomputers show that our universe is contained within another universe of dark matter that's many times more powerful, artificially holding the universe in place. That is the third dimension. And this is something, you know, David Icke was talking about 25, 26, 27 years ago being attacked for. And I don't know if all of his theories are right, but I do know that he pioneered exposing the whole pedophile agenda, which is now out in the open. And so you have to pay attention to what David Icke has to say. He certainly gets people thinking, and that's something the establishment doesn't want. Before there was Alex Jones on the scene, there was David Icke. I remember he blasted on the scene in the early 1990s. He'd been a top British broadcasting host of their morning shows, nighttime shows, sports programs. I mean, he was a mainstay of the UK and really around the world. And then he had a, I guess, Saul on the road to Damascus moment, hit by that bolt of light, and suddenly saw a whole different paradigm view of the universe. And I would read the things David Icke was saying just a few years before I even got on air. And I thought, well, this is just too far out. But then as I personally just researched from the news and from white papers and from what was admitted, as time went on, it more and more lined up with what David Icke had been saying as the future became the present. And so I know this now. Whoever's running this, whatever it is, it's anti-human. And it's telling us humans are a disease and bad and we need to be taken off the planet. And that a post-human world is about to be here. And that only those that merge with machines will be part of the future. Now, Ray Kurzweil said that 30 years ago. And other transhumanists said that come out of the Eugenics movement. That created the whole movement with the trans agenda. To give up our humanity. But as we go down this road and as it becomes out in the open, as it emerges, as David Icke said so long ago it would finally do, we learn that it is definitely poisonous. It's definitely making our lifespan go down. It's making us be completely mentally ill. It's causing us to have all these diseases. It's causing us to be hateful. It's causing suicide to explode. And everything they're doing, the white papers come out from Bayer Pharmaceutical and Monsanto and others that they knowingly put out glyphosate to cause massive cancer in women. They knowingly put fluoride in the water to lower IQ and destroy fertility. It's now all admitted. They knowingly do all of this to stun us like a spider bites its prey, but just enough to stun it, then it winds it up, waits for the poison over the next few days to liquefy its insides, and then sucks it all out. Well, the spider is now moving towards us to finish the meal. And that's how David Icke described it, as a spider at the center of the web. So I want to cover the waterfront today. He's been on hiatus, writing books, making films. I was saying, hey, you haven't been on in a couple of years. Why? He said, I've just had my head down. Well, he's here now, and hopefully he'll come back again soon, because 2 hours with the breaks is not enough to cover every angle. Now, I didn't know where he'd go with hundreds of pieces of this puzzle. but he said the global corporate climate takeover and transgenderism as the gateway to transhumanism, which was in my stack as the first thing I was going to bring up, knowing how key it is without even talking to David. So we're on the same page there, but just big picture. The globalist Elon Musk was challenging this, saying, beware those that worship AI gods and they want to get rid of humans. Now he says, oh, take brain chips. They're coming out next year. Put them in your kids. You're going to get to see the other dimensions. You'll be able to see these entities. And he's tweeting images of demons and owls. And this is a Silicon Valley cult that admits now that they believe that through DMT they're in contact with these other realms and entities. So all of these things you talked about almost 30 years ago are now coming to the surface, David Icke. So whether it's truly real or not, or whether it's some genetic mass hallucination with the inbred elites and a product of that, it's still real. So David Icke, that's my intro, davidicke.com. Your new book is out as well. I can't wait to read it. The Trigger, the explosive new book by David Icke, now available. Thank you so much for joining us. You'll have the floor for the next hour and 50 minutes. Where would you like to start?
Well, Alex, nice to talk to you again. Glad you're still going after all the bans, etc. And we have to keep going because it's starting to dawn on people for the first time in many cases that the scale of what's going on is absolutely vast. And so often people look at the news and they look at world events and they will research this or they research that, all of which needs doing. But there's still dots within a vast picture. And once you realize what that picture is, then all the dots fall into place. And I have this phrase I use, know the outcome and you'll see the journey. And if we can uncover what the outcome is planned to be, then suddenly everything that happens daily in the world that appears to be, to most people, random and happening in and of itself, suddenly, once you know what the planned outcome is, become very clear and blatant steps towards that outcome. And so if we look at the big picture, and again, you know, as you say, I've been saying this for a very, very long time and been ridiculed for it because, you know, if you're going to be a relatively few and you are going to control billions and you are going to direct the society of billions, you have to control the perceptions of the billions. Because from perception comes behavior. You want to control behavior, you control perception. And how do you control perception? How do we form perceptions? We form perceptions from information received. It could be a personal experience, it could be the 10 o'clock news, a Facebook post. It's information received. We form our perceptions. From our perceptions come our behavior. So in that sequence, first and foremost, control information. That's what all this censorship's about, and all the bans and all the suppression. And it's also what the education system is about, which is a massive perceptual programming operation, which starts at a very young age, continues through all the formative years of young people. This is where all the woke stuff is coming out of, and then continues through mainstream sources for the rest of a person's life. A human life is actually a perceptual download of the official version of everything. And the reason I say that in relation to what we're talking about is the narrow band of information, perception that we're given, what I call the postage stamp consensus, only allows for a tiny, tiny span of possibility. And if you stay within that postage stamp of possibility, the real world, mate, then you're all right. You're intelligent. You are. Oh, he's a good mind. Oh, yeah, he's an intelligent man, he is. But you step off that postage stamp and you start exploring information and areas of life and society that are beyond the postage stamp, i.e. people like me saying, actually behind all this is a non-human force, and postage stamp perception will, by reflex action, just like pressing enter on a computer,
will defend the status quo. We've got to go to break, but before I'd even talk to you, we didn't do any pre-interview, David Icke. I said I want you up front to go to the end, and as you're saying, it's critical to go to the end first. So when we come back, I hope you'll go to the end, and then we'll go back to the beginning as best your knowledge is. But now it's everybody knows this is a non-human force, whatever it is, and it's out to kill us. So we got 45 seconds. Please continue.
So people like me, therefore, all these decades have been ridiculed and dismissed for talking about a non-human force being behind all this. And a lot of people who've ridiculed me have been those that follow the Bible and talk about demons. You've got the Islamic belief system who talk about the jinn. You've got the Gnostics belief system that talks about the archons. You've got the Zulu belief system that talks about the Chitahuri. These are all different names for this non-human force that's
Stay there. Let's talk about the enemy when we come back with David Icke. Finally. I am your host, Alex Jones. And David Icke is our guest here today. And he's got the floor here to talk about this non-human force that now has the planetary controllers openly saying they're building a post-human world, ladies and gentlemen. A post-human world, and that humans are bad, and the environmental movement is going to save the earth from the humans, and that all that's going to be left is humans that give up their original form. David Icke, thank you for joining us. DavidIcke.com. Please continue.
Pleasure. Well, what I've been talking about for the best part of 30 years in terms of this subject is the fact that you can track this in different cultures. This is one of the very compelling things about all this. When you look at the accounts and the legends and the stories from different cultures all around the world, this same common theme is there again and again and again, under different names, but the theme is the same, that a non-human force came in and started to hijack the human world. And their plan is to assimilate human consciousness into itself. And so, you know, I hear people talk about AI this and AI that and AI the other. I very rarely hear anyone say, but what is AI? What is it? Oh, it's artificial intelligence. Yeah, but what does that mean? There are different levels. Obviously, there's algorithmic artificial intelligence. There's what they call learning artificial intelligence. But what I've been saying for years and years and years is there's one level of this artificial intelligence that is actually the force that I'm talking about. And so when you have Ray Kurzweil, as you've mentioned, and others, the utter fraud, by the way, Elon Musk, we could talk about him a bit more later, maybe. And certainly Kurzweil talks about, by 2030, he gives that time period, humans will start to have their brains connected to AI. And the reason that they're so open about it is the sales pitch. The sales pitch is we'll become superhuman. We will not. We will become subhuman and posthuman. Because once AI is connected to the human brain, and Kurzweil's very open about this, AI will do more and more and more of human thinking, he says, until human thinking as we know it now is negligible, in the end, gone. And what I've just described, just by quoting him, is the assimilation of human consciousness, the end of the human mind as we know it. So instead of having to manipulate information to dictate perception, which dictates behavior, through this AI connection, there'll be no need for any of that, because our thoughts and what passed were then our emotional responses will be coming direct. This is what it's all about. And what's happened is what I call the totalitarian tiptoe, step by step by step. We have been infiltrated by artificial intelligence, which is doing more and more of what humans used to do, taking over more and more of human society. And of course, people like me, I'm 67, born in 1952, I have a radar. I know what it was like before, and I can see what it's like now in comparison. The young people and the kids being born today, this is all they know. This is reality to them, this technological AI insanity. And the idea was why they're targeting the young, why they've got the young addicted to smartphones, which they hold, then addicted to things on their body, like your smart watches and your Bluetooth and all the rest of it. And the next stage, which is already underway, getting in the body, this step by step by step, kitty, kitty, here, kitty, kitty, kitty technique, is because the young people that they're targeting now will be the adults when they want to bring this in full blown. And they want the young so addicted to technology that they will accept the outcome,
because they've got to get the next version. And let's talk about that, because this is all admitted now. You talked about it 30 years ago. I talked about it 25 years ago. It's all admitted that they're making humans obsolete, and that the AI is already making all the decisions. It doesn't ask. It interfaces from the phone into your car, tells you when you need gas, even before the car blinks on and tells you need gas. People don't know how to do math anymore. People don't know how to communicate. The language is shrinking. We're dying. This isn't empowering us like Elon Musk says it will. It's killing us. And he said just a few months ago, he said, the AI won't take over your brain right away, and then started laughing. His eyes are all whacked out. His pupils are giant. Tim Cook's pupils are giant. I know a lot of military's already gotten brain chips. I told people that 15 years ago. It was declassified 10 years ago. From the intel I've got, a lot of these guys already have chips and are also on a lot of drugs, and that goes into the whole culture of Silicon Valley and convincing people to give up their humanity.
Well, Elon Musk is a total fraud. I've been pointing him out for a long time. You know, when you come out and you say that AI could be the end of humanity, brackets true, and then you start a company called Neuralink to connect the human brain to computers, when this smart grid, which is what the human mind and technology and everything through the Internet of Things, etc., is designed to be connected to, this smart grid is absolutely essential to this AI takeover of the human mind. It's all connected. And if you are going to have a global grid, a global bubble, artificial bubble, which you are going to connect everyone to, then things like Wi-Fi and the internet have to be on every inch of the planet. It has to be. No one excluded. That's the idea of this grid.
And this is the site of the AI system that interfaces with the humans and absorbs us. And Google admitted when they were founded 25 years ago, their plan was to build an AI-human interface where we are part of the AI, just as Arthur C. Clarke envisioned. And then he wrote Childhood's End about us being uploaded into the mothership, but giving up our bodies. And now they're saying Childhood's End is real, and that that's the plan they want us to carry out.
Yeah, but I mean, this wasn't decided yesterday. Of course, it goes way, 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 way back into what we perceive as history. But where I was going with this is that the only way you're going to cover the entire planet with the cloud, as Kurzweil calls it, is from space. And here we have the same Elon Musk, through his SpaceX, that's sending up all the satellites.
Stay there, David Icke. You're on fire, David Icke. I'm not normally standing on my feet when I have a guest on, but more and more I'm standing up during the broadcast to symbolize that we're not in Kansas anymore. The fight for human consciousness The war on for our mind is intensifying. David Icke is here. DavidIcke.com needs no introduction. He's laying out the total takeover, the post-human world, the addiction to the phones, the devices, like a face sucker now entering our body. All the major sites, all the major tech companies are coming out with competing brain chips. Facebook, Google, they've already got the devices on our homes spying on us. Suddenly, they admit what we were telling you decades ago, that they would put these devices in your homes and then spy on you. And it's all admitted. Now they've moved on to brain chips for you and your family. Now pedophilia is being normalized. What's it all about? David Icke pioneered exposing the pedophilia running the British government and how it was spreading worldwide. Now that's all out in the open. I want him to lay it out for you here today and how we can reverse this. And there is a huge awakening. There isn't just evil in the universe, there's good. And so how do we expose this and fight this? And what is the good path into the future versus where this non-human, anti-human force wants to take us? Where is that place versus where we could go? David Icke.
Well, I could just finish what I was saying before the break, Alex, about Elon Musk. If you're going to cover every inch of the planet with this cloud, which you're going to connect the human brain to, then you've got to do it from space. And it's Elon Musk again, who through SpaceX is putting all these satellites up. And there's meant to be tens of thousands of them eventually that are beaming Wi-Fi and 5G at the entirety of the planet. And the end game in all this is to create a technological sub-reality which humans are connected to and will be no more than computer terminals on this internet. And this manufactured internet of control, the smart grid. And one of the other things that I've been saying over the years is that this non-human force operates beyond the human frequency band. Because again, if you just take the postage stamp consensus version of possibility that we're given from cradle to grave, then people will think that when they look through their eyes, they're seeing everything there is in the space they're looking at. They're not. It's tiny, the band of frequency that we have for visual sight. Tiny. According to mainstream science, the electromagnetic spectrum is 0.005% of what exists in the universe. Visible light, which is the only tiny band of frequency that we can see, is a smear of the 0.005%. So the virtual entirety of existence in infinite existence is denied to us. We cannot see it because this vehicle will not decode it. It's like being tuned to a radio or television station and it can see and experience only that station. I can't switch the channel. We can, but most people don't. And this force is operating outside of the human frequency band. And so to manipulate within the human frequency band, they've had to create a network of bloodlines and secret societies to manipulate human society on behalf of this force. And this is what the Satanists are interacting with in their rituals. They're interacting with this non-human force operating outside the human frequency band. And so when people talk about bloodlines, and of course royalty goes back, I mean, royalty. What is royalty? Oh, it's bloodline. All right. What's aristocracy? Oh, it's bloodline. What does that mean? Oh, it means they interbreed. Yeah, but why do they interbreed? Why have these bloodlines been so obsessed with interbreeding since the ancient world? For a long time, they called it royal and aristocratic. They still do in Britain, staggeringly. We have a head of state in Britain, the Queen, and her Adams family children.
And David, let me briefly interject on this. We now know what was hypothesized hundreds of years ago, that birds, insects, but also humans have cone cells in the brain that are able to pick up the magnetic line. So that's how geese can fly north in the summer, south in the winter. That's how hummingbirds can fly from North America 3,000 miles, 4,000 miles to South America along those magnetic lines. And so the royalty is interbreeding to, again, develop receptors in the brain that are already there, but to intensify those to pick up a certain interdimensional frequency. And the reason I say this is studying Skull and Bones, reading secret documents that Anthony Sutton got from Charlotte Iserby and others. That's why they're doing this. They believe, they call it spiritualism, that they're interfacing with these entities, but really it's, again, just electromagnetic through this galactic internet. And you're absolutely right that now the globalists admit that they are communicating with entities more and more, and they're rolling it out at the university research level, and people taking DMT and other drugs intravenously are going in and now mapping these dimensions, and now they're trying to externalize that method that I heard about when I was a kid, because I just happened to be at a dinner table with some researchers that had been involved in it, and they were telling my parents about it. I'm just going to leave it at that. But I'm a kid hearing about this, and it just sounds completely fantastical. Then you forget about it for a long time. But my parents had some friends that were in research science in San Francisco, and that seems to be one of the main epicenters of the research in this post-human world. So you're talking about all this, but now they say they want a post-human world. Now they say humanity's about to be obsolete, NBC News. They now say we're going to merge with the machines. They now say that we are the robots. So yes, this is their admitted plan. So I wanted to ask you, why are they now suddenly admitting so much of the plan after denying it for so long? And as you said, they're putting in the 5G systems that literally will slowly kill our humanity while they control us as biological androids.
Well, what they've done with the technological agenda is that they are selling it as a wonderful thing. You know, the more and more we allow technology to become part of us, the more we'll be like gods and all this nonsense. It's the sales pitch. See, there comes a point where you can't hide it anymore because it's so obvious. So for a long time, you keep your plans secret because you don't want to give people a long period of preparation of knowing where it's going.
To form a resistance.
Honestly, yeah. So what you then do is you get close to your end game. And when you get close to your end game, so many things are going into place that really anyone with half a brain cell on active duty could see it. So what you do when it becomes visible, because it has to be if it's going to become what society is, then you start selling it as a good thing and a wonderful thing. This is why we've had this shift. It's selling this Orwellian technological nightmare as a wonderful thing. And I tell you another part of this. The Green Party in Britain had its conference a few weeks ago. And some people in the Green Party, only a few, unfortunately, wanted a debate at that conference on 5G. And the Green Party hierarchy turned it down. And when one or two of the people protested outside that this debate had been denied, a security guard came out and said that if they didn't go away, that they'd call the police. Now, this is where the green movement has gone now. It's become the climate.
By the way, you were the leader of that, 30-something years ago. Stay there, David Icke. When we come back, we're going to lay this out, the compartmentalization and where the globalist endgame goes, the post-human endgame. Even if you don't believe it's aliens, folks, or interdimensionals, whatever you want to call them, the globalists say the post-human world's here and that you're all dead and I'm dead while they slowly kill us. Well, I'm angry and I'm awake and I'm going to do something about it. What are you going to do? David Icke's our guest, davidicke.com. I'm Alex Jones. This is not a simulation. This is not a drill. Or as I've said, the simulation is real. That all these big top CEOs, the head of Bank of America came out 2 years ago and said, this is all a simulation. Something's holding it in place. We're enslaved by something. And they've got the dark matter studies and the mathematic equation showing that there's a force many times more powerful than this reality, holding it in place artificially. What's really going on? I read David Icke books, I don't know, like 26, 27 years ago, where he was talking about just that. So whatever humans can theoretically think of, we end up finding out actually exists. What a wild universe. Who are the players? Well, the ruling class have a good idea who the players are, and they're keeping us away from knowing that. But all the ancient cultures and the Bible, the Old and New Testament, give you a pretty clear idea, and it matches up with what other cultures said. And now, towards the end game, world government, mark of the beast, the Chinese Communist Social Score, the UN came out, it's in Reuters today, and said the Chinese communists are running the global standardization of face scanning for a world ID to access the internet. And all this stuff's been building very slowly, but now more's happening in a week than what happened in 6 months. Then more's going to happen in a day than what happened in a year. It's a quickening. It's an acceleration. David Icke's here. Now, listen, you need to get his books. They'll definitely get people thinking. I'm not even saying I agree with all of it, but I'm very, very open to it because I respect David Icke. And I'd say about 90% of what he's talked about has turned out to be accurate. He is a maverick, a man before his time. That's coming to you from somebody who's a man before his time. Obviously, you're an audience of activists before your time. We aren't just following globalist scripts. We are the vanguard, and we need to remember that and understand that. So The Trigger, the explosive new book by David Icke, is available at davidicke.com. We'll talk more about that in the next hour with him. They're really pissed off that you keep spreading the word because they know as their plan emerges, as it all gets admitted, world government, pedophilia as the world religion, vampirism, Satanism out in the open, as all of this comes out, as the Epstein comes out, as all the royal family devil worship comes out, the Jimmy Savile stuff comes out, as it all comes out, our credibility's got to go up. So they've got to have us silenced or forgotten, or they need to silence us so they can build a straw man and put words in our mouth. But we're not silenced. David Icke isn't silenced. So, David, please continue with the big agenda, where they're taking us, and how we counter it. And then I want to get into the Satanism, the pedophilia, the royal family, because you've been a trailblazer exposing that.
Yeah, well, as I was saying before the break, the Green Party doesn't want to know. And the climate cult in general, which is what the Green Party has become, unfortunately. They don't want to know about challenging 5G and this whole technological agenda.
And the break interrupted you, and so did I. Go back to some people wanted to raise it at the conference, so they were threatening to call the police on them. The environmentalists now want radiation. They want 5G. Top environmentalists say get rid of humans. Radiation's good.
Well, the reason that they are supporting this stuff is that it is being sold to them as a way of overcoming climate change and saving the planet. And this whole climate hoax is a fundamental key to the justification of almost everything. Not just this whole technological agenda, but what goes with it, which is the centralization of global power over the fine detail of our lives. And so you need an excuse to centralize power to dictate the fine detail of people's lives. And this climate hoax is what they've chosen to do it through. So if you start looking now as this climate cult agenda gets faster and faster and more expansive, all the different elements that this cult wants, the big cult wants, the global cult wants, are being justified by saving the planet from climate change, not least massive centralization of power. And what's happened, and we'll go back to this postage stamp consensus, recent generations have had that postage stamp squeezed and squeezed as they've gone through the education system or what passes for it. And not only have they had their perceptions of reality, the world, etc., downloaded, there has been a political agenda relating not least to the climate cult and all that they want to unfold because of it, that's been going through the schools. The sexuality, the gender agenda is going through the schools as well, being forced on kids. And what we're now seeing...
It's totally massive in public schools, private schools, colleges, down to 5-year-olds in kindergarten, teaching children to masturbate, sexualizing them, men in girls' restrooms. What is the end game of this full-on assault?
Well, this is all an expression of this squeezing of the postage stamp. They are indoctrinating and manipulating the minds of the young to have a perception of reality that absolutely suits where they want the world to go. And therefore, in the end, the young people come out of the education system and they become adults, and they go into things like politics. There's no greater example of an outcome of this programming than Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and her Green New Deal. What the Green New Deal is demanding, and what the Extinction Rebellion organization that shuts streets in London and around the world is demanding, which is the same, is the centralization of power over every area of people's lives on the basis of saving the planet.
And they admit that AI will manage and watch every human activity to save the Earth. So it's a global problem, a global solution, a global tax with global surveillance to then selectively cut off individuals and groups' energy that don't comply with all the other demands of the social credit score.
Yeah, and it's all a mind game. It's all about manipulating and imposing a perception, because from perception comes everything else. So when you're trying to manipulate the young, and crucially, not least this is happening through the climate hoax, divide the young from older people, another level, another fault line of divide and rule. So you bring in a young person, Greta Thunberg, and you turn her into some kind of martyr god who calls on kids around the world to strike over the climate. And
she's very Hitlerian, big, huge, creepy murals, and you better do this. We're going to make you pay for what you've done to us.
But the idea is you get a young person to focus the attention of young people. And for me, Greta Thunberg has been extraordinarily abused and goes on being abused and exploited by using her, and that's the form of abuse I'm talking about, by using her as a political tool to bring about an agenda. So all this is going on, and the outcome is designed to be a global Marxist stroke fascist
And let's
state.
go to that. Let's talk about where they're taking us in the end game, where they admit they're taking us, and how we counter that in this next hour with David Icke of DavidIcke.com. His new book, The Trigger. I can't wait to read it. You should get it. You should give it to friends and family. You should wake people up. That's the #1 mission. It's not work. It's the animating contest of liberty. It's survival. That's the sound that a group of humans can make together. That's beautiful. We are an amazing species. But there are dark forces in this universe that seek to enslave us and force us to merge with their silicon system. It's now out in the open. Can you believe it's all out in the open now? When will the creatures step out from behind the shadows, or will they ever? There's no doubt about it, ladies and gentlemen. They're keeping babies alive. They're selling their organs. There's a world government. There's an attack on the family. This is a short segment, long segment coming up. David, before we go any further, because you never do this when you come on, I haven't read your book yet. I've read many of your books. I'm going to get your book, The Trigger. It's got the Twin Towers blowing up on the cover. I can guess what the book's about, but tell us about the book. Tell us where you've been, because I usually do a lot of conferences and speeches. I know you've cut way back the last year and a half, and we've all missed you. So spend a few minutes on David Icke.
Well, I've been doing internet videos all the time, as I do, but I've been writing a book. I'm almost finished another one since this one came out. I set about doing an update on a book I wrote about 9/11 called Alice in Wonderland and the World Trade Center disaster. It came out in September 2002. And I set about just doing an update. And within 2 weeks, I thought, this is not going to be an update. This is going to be a whole blank sheet of paper. And I put together this massive work, which is in 2 parts. The first, and it's not just about 9/11, but that's the theme. The first part of it demolishes the official story of 9/11, which is an absolute joke and an insult to the families who lost loved ones on 9/11, an absolute insult. And in the second half of the book, I tell an amazing story leading to who actually did do 9/11, who was really centrally orchestrating 9/11. And it wasn't 19 hijackers that couldn't fly one-engine Cessnas. And it's a story that goes back to the 17th century and the creation of a cult called Sabbateanism through a guy called Zabbatai Zevi. And in the next century, a guy came along. He claimed to be a Jewish Messiah. In the next century, along came a guy called Jacob Frank, who said he was the reincarnation of Zevi and the biblical patriarch Jacob. And Sabbateanism became Sabbatean Frankism. And what it is an inversion of Judaism. What it does, it takes, for instance, if in Judaism it's a day of fasting, then in Sabbatean Frankism, it's a day of feasting. These Sabbatean Frankists hate Jewish people, but they hide behind them. And I follow how their great technique is infiltration. They'll infiltrate, say, the Jewish community. They'll infiltrate, as they did, the Islamic community. They'll infiltrate the Christian community, and they'll appear to be advocates of that religion or that culture while working towards the agenda of this cult, Sabbatean Frankism.
And its public name is the ADL today, correct?
Well, that's one expression of it. That's one expression of it. It's got a vast global network now, which made it able to manipulate 9/11. The core of the CIA and the American deep state is the Sabbatean Frankist death cult, and in other places around the world, too. I'll tell you a quick story, if I've got time before the break.
Weren't a lot of the Nazis part of the Sabbatean cult?
Oh, absolutely. It's all connected. Sabbatai Zevi operated in the Ottoman Empire, the Islamic Ottoman Empire, and he was told by the Sultan that he either converted to Islam or they would sort him out, if you know what I mean. So he converted, and a lot of his followers, because by that time in the 17th century, he had 1 million followers.
Hold on, listen, let's get more into this. This is really important too. Yeah, wow, David Icke's our guest. We'll be back in 60 seconds. And we are back live. Alex Jones here with the one, the only David Icke, talking about his book, The Triggering, or The Trigger. And he had a Skype problem, or we had a Skype problem, who knows. Finish up with what you were getting to, and then I want to get into the fact that we know the globalists are conducting occult rituals, why they're doing it, the pedophilia, why they're coming out with it, why they're admitting it, why they're promoting it, and where they want to take us versus what we can do to stop this agenda, and what you think the timeline is, David, because you've been a big trailblazer. I want you to tell us what you think's coming next, because they now admit world government, post-human future, really nightmare stuff that's all over the news. They're just telling us roll over and die, and I really don't want to do that. So please continue.
Yeah, I was just saying before the Skype broke up that there's a chapter in The Trigger of when this Sabbatean Frankist cult moved in on America. And when you look at 9/11, you can see how this cult was the cement that pulled the whole thing together, so that the CIA were involved, the Pentagon was involved, the government was involved, the FBI was involved, because this cult works like that. It infiltrates all these different cultures, all these different agencies, and through those connections, it works as one unit. And when you look at the ultra-Zionist involvement in 9/11, before, during, and after, it is absolutely staggering. You know, the Jewish population of the world is 0.2%. And the part of that community that I'm talking about is a tiny fraction of 0.2%, a tiny fraction of 2% of the American Jewish population. And yet, their positions of influence and control across 9/11 were just beyond belief. Now, that is not a statistical chance. That is because there's something to look at. And I expose it all in the trigger. And that's not to say the Jews did 9/11. They didn't. The vast majority of Jewish people have no idea they've been infiltrated. That the Islamic community don't realize they're being infiltrated. Christian Zionism in America doesn't realize it's been infiltrated. But this is how the Roman Church doesn't realize at a follower level that it's been infiltrated. But it has, by this same, through the centuries, death cult. And they are, as I was saying, in Israel. And again, I say again, it's the Sabbatean Frankist cult that actually is the force running Israel. They've created this vast military cyber center at Beersheba. And all around that cyber center are research and development facilities put there by the major Silicon Valley companies. And they are turning out the technicians and the developers of this smart grid. They have an entire system in Israel whereby they are scanning the schools, they're scanning the universities, and then when they come into their conscripted military service, they're looking at those that have this capacity, this aptitude for cyber expertise, and they are putting them into this cyber development center at Beersheba, and then they're going off into Silicon Valley companies, creating their own startup companies, all to do with the smart grid, and they're representatives of this Mossad network. And that's why if you look again at Jeffrey Epstein, he was running a Mossad CIA, Sabbatean Frankist was the connection, blackmail operation on the rich and famous. Why? Because once they got you, then you will make decisions that this cult wants making to advance its agenda. I'm glad
I brought that up, and I definitely want to read the book. It's all fascinating.
Mainstream media have absolutely ignored it. They usually attack me. They usually demonize me. They have completely ignored it, and that tells you something.
Well, please come back again and get into the whole book. We'll spend 2 hours on it, and I can't wait to read it. Now, we've got limited time left here because Paul Watson's hosting the 4th hour, and I appreciate you've been gracious with your time, David. Let's start getting into the post-human endgame and the off-world or non-human element from your research, culturally looking at this, getting deep into it. I think basically everyone knows this is an anti-human agenda. It isn't just humans doing this. There's a master plan. It's very old. It's the globalists say they're in contact with interdimensionals. That's, you know, Joe Rogan's whole show is about how great it is and how wonderful it all is and how we should interface with these little friendly folks. If you say they're bad, then you're crazy, it doesn't exist, and you're nuts. But if you love it and it's good, well, we should all just do what these little elves tell us to do. But what's really going on here? Who are the globalists? What do they believe they're doing? Why is the British royalty so into the occult? Why is Prince Charles, you know, angry at his brother for an underage girl, which is bad? But meanwhile, he hangs out with Jimmy Savile, and we know does far worse things. Isn't Prince Andrew kind of the limited hangout right now?
Well, you see, over the last 30 years, I've researched so many subjects, and as you research them, they connect and they show you a picture. So as you follow these interbreeding bloodlines, which came out of the ancient world, particularly out of the Middle East, out of Babylon, out of Sumer, out of Egypt, and up into Europe, and then worldwide through the colonization of the world, you follow not just a sequence of interbreeding, because once you know, ironically, but that's the way it works. Once the world in general started rejecting overt rule by royalty, these bloodlines went into the dark suit professions. They went into politics, into banking, into business, and all this network. And when you follow these bloodlines through history, two other things follow: Satanism and pedophilia. Because these entities, you take pedophilia, these entities operating outside of human sight, they feed off human energy. You remember in the Matrix movies when the Morpheus character held up the battery and said, the machines have turned us into one of these, an energy source. Well, that's what they do. And the energy that they want, in humans in general, is what I call low vibrational emotional energy. They want energy we give off, because we're giving it off all the time in the terms of electromagnetic frequency, depending on our state of emotion and our state of mind. They want the energy of depression, the energy of fear, the energy of anxiety, sexual energy in its more extreme form. This is what they want, and they've structured society so that humans give them that energy, but their nectar, if you like, the energy they want more than anything, is the energy of prepubescent children.
And that's how they throw it in our face with Monster University. Oh, scaring the energy is what powers the monster kingdom. You're talking about this 30 years ago, but that's literally what they're doing. And terrorizing and torturing and using up a child is their ambrosia. And it's what they do in the satanic rituals.
But, this is why they, you know, if you go back into history and when they were openly sacrificing people, what were they doing? What was the line? Sacrificing young virgins to the gods.
Let's stay there. Let's talk about it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, David Icke is our guest. David, it's all coming out. You know, Jimmy Savile and the dungeons and the dead children and the royal family and best buddies with Prince Charles. But then Prince Andrew, who I'm not defending, is obviously, you know, with this underage 17, 16-year-old girl. There's blackmail going on, and it's obviously a deep state fight with each other, as now they're threatening to have videos come out of other world leaders. Bill Gates is involved, all these other people. Epstein was running meetings on an alternate world government, is what the Wall Street Journal reported 12 years ago. We covered it. And what the Guardian reported, oh, an alternate world government to save the world from overpopulation. Oprah Winfrey, Bill and Melinda Gates, Ted Turner, and others meeting secretly with Jeffrey Epstein at the Albert Einstein Institute. And then now Bill Gates living with, you know, staying with him in France, staying with him in New York, staying with him in the Caribbean, trying to cover that up, and then weird secret breeding programs and, you know, the ranch with the medical facilities. What in the hell is going on with these people, and why are there so many dead bodies of children found around the royals? And from your research, why is all this starting to come out? I mean, the deputy pope, the Pope's best buddy, just convicted of trafficking over 100 kidnapped little boys, barely made the news. 3,000 priests busted in Pennsylvania, barely made the news. They said, well, it wasn't just homosexual sex or pedophilia. They were doing satanic rituals in the churches, but it barely makes the news. So this is bigger than I thought it was. What in the hell is going on?
Sabbatean Frankism. You've covered every base with that. This is what this cult does. That's why Epstein was involved. And Jimmy Savile was someone who had a lot of connections into this as well. And so there's no way that Savile wasn't running because he was, one of the things that's not come out about Savile is the scale of the way he was providing children for the rich and famous, just like Epstein was. And you've got to ask this question, you see. I mean, let's do a little law of statistics for a minute. You've got one family in London in a big palace, and you've got on one side of the ocean the most famous pedophile and procurer of children and child trafficker in America, Epstein, and he's a friend of Prince Andrew. And then you got in Britain the most famous pedophile and procurer of children for the rich and famous, necrophiliac, sex with dead bodies and all that stuff that he was into, Savile. And he was a bosom buddy for decades of Prince Charles. And according to Savile's own words, he was introduced into the bosom inner circle of the British royal family in the 1960s. He was just a disc jockey. Why would the royals be interested in him? Well, he says that he was introduced by a guy called Lord Mountbatten, a big member of the royal family. And I've been saying in my books for years that Mountbatten was paedophile. And there was a book came out this year, which was quoting Freedom of Information Act documents from the FBI, in which they were also talking about the fact that there were claims that Mountbatten was a paedophile. So a paedophile member of the royal family introduces Savile, this procurer of children for the rich and famous, into the royal family inner sanctum. He's there for decades. And by the way, he was actually used as a mediator between Prince Charles and Lady Diana when their marriage was breaking down. He was acting as a mediator, this disc jockey paedophile. So the chances of that being a coincidence, of course, are ludicrous. And we have a situation in Britain where the police have not even acted or questioned this guy, Andrew, on the basis of what was claimed to have happened in a house in London.
And by the way, getting back to the whole Sabbatean angle, you've got the girlfriend of Epstein. Her dad was the famous British/Israeli intelligence operative who admittedly ran giant rings for sex operations and pedophilia. That's all even come out in mainstream news. So this is just an incredible nest of this.
Bob Maxwell is actually in the trigger because the Sabbatean Frankist Israeli Mossad have been manipulating the cyber world all along. And you'll remember this technology called Promise that was brought out by an American company, and then the American government, in league with Mossad, put back doors into it. So when it was being bought by all and sundry around the world, they had access to it. Well, according to Victor Ostrovsky, who was a Mossad agent, wrote a couple of books.
Oh, yeah, we've had him on the show.
Yeah. Well, he was saying that Bob Maxwell, who was a big newspaper publisher in Britain, he owned the Daily Mirror at one point. I interviewed him once for the BBC, one of the most unpleasant pieces of work I've ever met in my life. I needed a shower when I left. Anyway, he is named by Ostrovsky as a Mossad agent who made a fortune selling the Promise backdoor software all over the world. And according to him, it was Mossad that killed Maxwell on his boat, the Lady Ghislaine. And so here you have this, what I would strongly suggest is a Sabbatean Frankist Mossad agent, Epstein, in league with the daughter of a Mossad agent, Bob Maxwell. It's a very small world once you start putting the pieces together.
Yeah, but if you dig into his funeral in Israel, they admitted that. He was a super spy and got the highest honors. That's not even secret about Bob Maxwell.
Yeah, he was buried on the Mount of Olives, wasn't he?
Yeah, and I mean, that's just a fact. So, I mean, it's a fact that this was a giant trifecta between British, U.S., and Israeli intelligence. And so, again, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, all of them, we know that Oprah Winfrey's highly compromised and likes girls. And it's just a fact. And so these people know they're being set up. It's like part of the club. It's the initiation. It's not like Bill Gates and all them just didn't know this was going on. They're going there to bathe in the waters, and that's just how you get in the club.
Yeah, and of course, when you get into this club, if you are among the rich and famous, then you're not only in the club, you're compromised ongoing. And therefore, you do what the club tells you to do. Otherwise, it's revealed. So when this Epstein network started getting close, because, you know, you've got to hold your hand up to these girls who've been, particularly Virginia Roberts, who's been vociferous in standing up and not bowing to the pressure, that it was in danger of unraveling in public. Then, of course, you have to remove.
Well, I'm not saying Virginia Roberts is bad, and I believe her. She's got the. I'm saying 16, 17-year-old girls is a limited hangout. We all know that. I mean, my God, it's chopping children's heads off. It's drinking their blood. I'm not
saying that you're saying that Virginia Roberts is.
No, I'm not. No. I'm not saying you're saying that. I'm saying as soon as I say that's nothing, they're only focusing on that because that's a limited hangout to divert off the really horrible Satanism.
Well, what they always do when something comes out is they try to make that the holding position. And so what's happened with Prince Andrew is the Queen.
Stay there. Let's talk about this when we come back. Well, somebody must be intercepting the emails we send to David Icke, because I've been trying to get him on for 2 years. He remembers like one email, and he couldn't come on. He was busy. So definitely you're going to hear David here on the show more, and we appreciate him coming on. But there's all sorts of stuff that does go on. We have had our email intercepted and blocked before. That's why I tell the crew more and more we got to pick the phone up and call people, because there's a lot of weirdness going on with the AI, with the control systems, with the shadow banning. I remember just 6 months ago they were on CNN going, well, let's see if Jones has WhatsApp on Facebook to privately communicate. They go, he doesn't, but thousands of other nationalists do. Ban them. And they banned people from using private messengers like we're Al-Qaeda or something. David Icke's here. He's doing this segment, the next little short segment that Paul Watson takes over from the UK. He's loaded for bear as usual. But David, I don't mind that we swerved off into your book. I didn't know what it was about. It's very interesting. I look forward to reading it. And I actually got to get it. I'm going to read it. I've read many of your books. The page turners, thought-provoking. That's what's important. But there's no doubt there's a system that's killing us, that's dumbing us down, that's taking us out of humanity, out of love, out of justice, and that is turning us against each other, and that says humans are bad, teaching us to hate ourselves, teaching us to have a post-human world, while they wreck the planet itself and override it with genetic engineering and the chemtrailing, and which they now admit they're doing, and all the rest of the craziness. So what's going to be admitted next? Yeah, the CIA director come out and say, yeah, we're doing exactly what people said we are, but it's secret. What's coming next from these globalists, and what's their total end game? I mean, I think it's just get rid of humans altogether is what they're saying publicly now. I mean, how fantastical is that? And then how do we counter this?
Well, they're going to be more and more open. They're going to have to be more and more open, because what they're doing is being introduced. And along with trying to sell it in a positive way, as I talked about earlier, another side story to being open about it is to actually, in effect, say, well, what are you going to do about it? We got the power now, nothing you can do. And they are going to try to take the power away from people by telling them that they have all the power. And so people go, well, what's the point? There's no point. You can't stop them. They're too powerful. They're not. They have to persuade us that they're powerful, and then they can be powerful because we believe they are. There's billions and billions of humans. The number of people in full knowledge of what they're doing in terms of this cult is tiny. And this is why they are desperate for people not to understand the nature of reality for a start. That's why it's all been suppressed, because they know how reality works. They know this is not a solid world. I mean, quantum physics knows that. So if you live in a solid world, and that's how we experience it, but why we do can be very easily explained, as I do in the books. And when you feel the world is solid and everything's apart from everything else, then what do you have? Limitation. It's not possible. When I say this is happening, that's happening, many times people have said to me, well, that can't be happening. It's not possible. No, it's not possible if the world's solid, but it's not. They know that actually the base form of this reality is waveform information fields. Think Wi-Fi. So you've got a Wi-Fi field, and it's just a radiation field of information, but the computer simply decodes that field into a completely different reality on the screen. And everywhere apart from on the screen, the internet or what you see is nothing like what you're looking at. Only on the screen does it look like that. And in the same way, we are decoding waveform information fields, fluid waveform information fields, think Wi-Fi again, into this reality.
And there's no doubt they're coming in to jam the transmissions we're getting from God, the universe, the information, to jam it with artificiality. And you read their white papers, they admit they're trying to stop something that humans are going to do. They're trying to bring in the false new age to make us think that they're saving us when they're really killing us, because there is something really new coming.
This is the whole point. No, I talked earlier about the postage stamp consensus and all that. What all this perceptual programming does, especially programming self-identity. This is why they're getting this self-identity politics, where people's self-identity is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and the letters describing it get longer and longer and longer. It's because they want us to have a myopic view of self-identity.
A totally selfish island unto yourself, totally pissed off, hating everyone around you, a satanic worldview.
But also a myopic self-identity. So we self-identify the I with our labels, your race, your religion.
Sure, so it's false labeling, false programming, so that it's a jamming what the real universe is. Putting up fake icons that they're teaching us through political correctness is literally to sabotage reality and not let us even decode third-dimensional transmissions.
Yeah, so what they're doing is they're basically putting us in a bubble, a perceptual bubble. And therefore,
and that's the basis of telling someone they're a victim. So you wanted to get into transhumanism and the transgender. Here it is. Transgender man who gave birth loses battle to be registered as a father. That's upside down world saying, you know, pig not given the right to say you can fly to the moon and back. Britain's first transgender couple to allow their 5-year-old child to begin transitioning. A total cult, again, doing this to their daughter. Here's another one. Favorite drag queen storytime author likes pedophile Instagram post talking about hashtag young boy lover, hashtag pedophilia, hashtag, I mean, it's all right here. Scroll through that for folks. With all of this open Satanism and the coming out, and these people all dressed like demons in drag queen storytime, and women bringing their children to offer them up to men, many of them convicted pedophiles. What in the hell is going on there, David? Well, this externalization of this.
Well, I would like to comment on that because it's very important in terms of some of the subjects we covered. But if I could just finish this one point.
Oh, yes. You just said make sure I bring that up. But go ahead.
Sure. And I want to talk about it. I'll come to it. I'll be very brief. So we've been put in this perceptual bubble, and all the information we get, which forms our perceptions of self and the world, is within this bubble. But actually, if we open our minds, particularly open our hearts, we can access levels of expanded awareness that gives you a vaster, greater fix on the world and reality than ever that does. And what they want to do with this smart grid, this connecting the human brain to artificial intelligence, is to stop us expanding our consciousness into greater levels of awareness, understanding.
And that's admitted. The White House science czar said, we put fluoride in the water to lower your IQ to make you more manageable. They admit they're doing it. Talk about criminal activity.
Exactly. And so that's what it's all about. Anyway, in terms of the transgender thing, this relates to the whole smart grid technological agenda. They want, in the end, to change the nature of the human body so it becomes a synthetic human body. They're already working on it, sometimes in the open, overwhelmingly in the secret bases and projects. This synthetic human will not have gender and will not be able to procreate, which takes us into Brave New World and the World Hatchery method of technological produce of children, which is what Aldous Huxley was talking about in the world hatcheries. And so what they are doing is preparing people, particularly the young as well, because they'll be the adults, for the no-gender world. So this is the process. Confused gender, confused gender, confused gender, confused gender, fused gender, fused gender, no gender human. And because they are looking at a technological procreation instead of a human procreation, they don't need men and women anymore, because they don't need to procreate, because that's going to be done another way. And so what is happening with this transgender indoctrination, which is so disgusting, it's not because, again, it's not about protecting transgender people from discrimination.
It's about forcing this agenda and attacking the name man and woman and attacking the very biological jump point of the third dimension.
Well, in the same way that the school system, which has been completely taken over for this agenda, has been indoctrinating children into the climate cult agenda to terrify them that the world's going to end, so they are being at the same time indoctrinated into complete...
And boy, are they. Back in 2 minutes with the final segment with David Icke. All right, final segment with David Icke, Paul Watson taking over. Look at this headline. Wax my balls. Trans activist complains that gynecologist won't see her. Files more lawsuits. Continuing, transgendered men, again, give birth. Just totally made up. And then now these families where they pressure their kids to do it, it's not turning them into another sex. It's giving them chemicals that end up killing them early. It's criminal activity, in my view. And it came out of the Tavistock Institute, powerful report that Greg Reese put out. And I get mad at the crew because they're great people. But they like do these incredible reports, and it's like no promotion. It's not brought to me. Not a big deal isn't made about it. We don't even get the people that we have that have Twitter accounts to put it out. It's like just, eh. So if you don't take our stuff serious and get it out at band.video, nobody is. Because we got first-rate reporters and stuff breaking stuff that is earth-shattering. Because as David Icke just said, he's dead on. The climate change system is about teaching humans to hate themselves and about turning everything over to a world government AI system. And the transgenderism is of getting them ready for brain chips and everything else. Because if you'll accept a man's a woman and a woman's a dog or any of this other stuff, or people put Drano in their eyes because they want to be transabled, and then we got to pay for their tax money to take care of them, then we'll put up with cyborgs. Closing comments on that, David Icke, and I appreciate you joining us today.
Well, what have you just described? You just described George Orwell's 2 + 2 = 5. What they're telling us is to believe that 2 + 2 = 5. And in 1984, there were punishments for not accepting that, even if you thought it actually equaled 4. And so what we have now are the punishments. You've got parents who are terrified of social services knocking on their door if they don't go along with the tyranny now called a school, which is actually a tyranny, which is what they've become, imposing these things upon children. But if we're going to stop this, then we need to grow a pair, and we need to grow a backbone, and we need to not accept that 2 and 2 equals anything but 4. So when people say these things that you've just described, these ludicrous things, and you get attacked for saying actually that man and a woman is the biology of humans. And that's not to say that people can't be transgender. Good luck to them. But that's not what this is about. This is not about protecting transgender people. It's about indoctrinating kids to become confused about their gender for a big political reason. If this was about protecting transgender people, then when those transgender people, and I've been reading books about this, come out, who've been through the surgery, who've been through the transition, and say it was a big mistake, I wish I hadn't bowed to the pressure to do it because it's destroyed my life. The transgender activists, if it was about transgender people, would say, hey, if you're thinking about it, you need to listen to these people because there can be problems. No. what happens to those people when they come out and say, I made a mistake, is they are abused and vilified and demonized, because it's not about transgender. It's about an agenda. This is why when Jewish people come out and criticize Israel, they get more abuse from the Israeli networks than non-Jewish people. So it's not about protecting Jewish people. It's about protecting an agenda which has multiple faces. And what we need to do is refuse to accept that 2 and 2 equal anything but 4. So when they come out with this stuff, and we're supposed to keep our heads down and nod, we just say it's a load of freaking rubbish. What are you talking about? It's insane.
Exactly. Men can't have babies. Women aren't men. And we're not going to live in your damn crazy hell bop cult on PCP. That's what this is. It's not human. It's evil. Let's reject it. And that is what is empowering. David Icke, please come back very, very soon, because 2 hours was not enough. I've got so many other subjects I wanted to cover with you. So thank you so much for the time, and have a great Christmas coming up and a great New Year. Hopefully you'll come back even before this year's over, but regardless, in January, so we can host together in 2020. Thank you so much, DavidIcke.com.
Gentlemen, we have called you together to inform you that we are going to overthrow the United States government.
You still think that jet fuel brought down the World Trade Center? Does anybody else see a problem here? If the government has nothing to hide, why are they so afraid to answer a few questions? This story does not add up.